I'm very excited to be here. This is a really particularly distinguished panel. Both of our panelists are going to be honored tonight with Alumni Service Awards from the Tufts University Alumni Association, which I think is probably not anything any of the other panels today can say. So we're very proud. It turns out Robin and I were actually the same year at Tufts.
No, you were 1 year older.
I'm 1 year older. Okay, sorry.
I was not the same year.
He was not born, actually.
Yeah, 1 year makes a big difference.
He would not have been born yet. I'm very excited because my son is also in the audience today, who's a junior at Tufts, Benji. So it's very much a family kind of event, and I feel very much that way about Tisch generally. Jonathan was my year, and have been involved in Tisch for a long time with my very dear friend Deb Jospin and several of the other members of this board. So there are a couple of interesting stories, and one of the things that several students have said to me is that they find it particularly interesting and helpful to hear the stories of how people's careers unfolded. Yours, Amos, is probably just still unfolding, but we've been around the block a couple times. So what I wanted to do is just very quickly give a short background and then ask each of you to do the same thing. So I'm just going to give, sort of a 3 to 5 minute background about myself and my current work, and then I'll ask you guys to do the same thing if that's okay. As Nancy said, I run the Global Entrepreneurship Program at the U.S. Department of State and am advisor for entrepreneurship to Secretary Clinton, which I'm very excited about because there hasn't ever been one before. I believe that entrepreneurship is, on my door there's a sign that says World Peace through Entrepreneurship. I believe that entrepreneurship is not only one of the single most important parts of the American experience, which we have been remiss in not elevating to being a foreign policy initiative. In my view, it's as important as promoting human rights or democratic institutions. It's just a terribly important part of our DNA, but it is also, the single biggest driver of job growth and economic development and the political stability and civil society that derive from those things. And the Legatum Foundation said in its report last year that entrepreneurship and innovation correlate more closely with a nation's prosperity than any other factors, a rate of entrepreneurship and rate of innovation. So it's a terribly important part of economic development. The purpose of the global entrepreneurship in the Obama administration is to help emerging market countries develop their entrepreneurial sectors, specifically with a focus on youth and jobs, and specifically originally focused in Muslim-majority countries, as the president announced in his speech in Cairo in 2009. And so our program started in Egypt, where I am just about every month, and has extended now to Indonesia and Turkey, as well as Lebanon, Jordan, Tunisia, and Morocco. And we basically have a system of about 250 partners from 5 categories of organizations: corporations, NGOs, foundations, universities, and investors. And we have a whole range of programs to promote entrepreneurship across 6 categories of activity, which we consider to be essential to creating an entrepreneurial ecosystem. And those are identify, train, connect and sustain, fund, enable public policy, and celebrate entrepreneurs. That same model has been translated to the domestic sphere in an organization called Startup America, which some of you may have heard of, which President Obama launched on January 31st. It's modeled on the same design as our program: 5 categories of partners, 6 categories of activities. And I started this about 18 months ago after I rejoined or joined the government for the first time. My background is as an entrepreneur, several startups, long time in the entertainment industry. I was head of the operating committee at Warner Brothers, and then a couple of other stints as an investment banker and a consultant at McKinsey. I've been on the Tisch board and a whole bunch of other Tufts activities. I always joke with everybody, I came here 39 years ago and have never left. So that's my quick story. Robin, tell us a little about your path.
Well, it's interesting. I was wondering like how to get into this today, and Stephen at lunch provided me with the perfect opportunity because you gave such a good definition of a social entrepreneur at lunch, and he said there's really two different kinds of social entrepreneurs. One are the people that kind of can't do anything else. They can't hold down a regular job. They bounce around, and so they kind of have to become an entrepreneur and create something for themselves. And the second one, he said, is the person who identifies a need and gets a passion and then does whatever they can to fill that need. And so in listening to you, I thought, okay, because that's where I fit in. I identified a need, and I'll just give you sort of the bottom line of that need, that in this day and age, we still have a baby born with HIV/AIDS every single minute. This is awful. It's an awful statistic in and of itself, but it's made even more tragic by the fact that it's entirely unnecessary. There's not a reason in the world for a child to be born HIV positive anymore. We have safe and effective medicines to prevent the transmission of HIV from mother to child. And yet, and when you think about it, frankly, the greatest injustice, I think, of our time is that we have eradicated HIV in the developed world. We have fewer babies born with HIV in the US, the UK, and Europe combined in a year than in a single busy South African clinic. So this is an enormous injustice. 40% of mothers, infected mothers, will transmit to their babies in the developing world, less than 2% in the developed world. So why are we still having a baby born every single minute? Why are we having 1,000 babies born a day in sub-Saharan Africa with this devastating illness? It's kind of a perfect storm of three things that happen. One are broken health systems. The fact is, in the developing world, we have very few doctors. The nurses are so overworked, overwhelmed, overstressed. The last thing they have time to do is to sit with a young pregnant woman and educate her as to the options that she has available. And when I say very few doctors, I'll give you an example. In a place like Mozambique, where we operate, we have 3 doctors for every 100,000 people. We have 21 nurses for every 100,000 people. So, it's less than in a single floor of my doctor's medical building in Beverly Hills. So there is no medical care to go around. The second is really stigma and shame. The fact is, even today, women are always blamed for bringing HIV into their homes. Even when it's generally their male partners, their husbands, who give it to them, they can be abused, shunned, beaten, kicked out of their homes, worse. So they're afraid to seek testing and to seek medical care. And the third thing is I think, always behind any kind of devastation is ignorance. People still believe that HIV is a death sentence, that there's nothing you can do about it, that there's nothing you can do to prevent the transmission. And so that is clearly wrong today. So that's where Mothers to Mothers comes in. It was born with the idea that the greatest resource that we have in Africa are the women themselves. Let's take newly delivered mothers who are HIV positive, put them through a rigorous training, send them back into their prenatal units as what we call mentor mothers, so that when that young woman comes in and gets this devastating diagnosis, immediately a mentor mother is called who can hold her hand and say, "You're not alone, I'm HIV positive too." Without Mothers to Mothers, before we came into being, that same young woman would come in, and either whether she was from a rural area and lived in a shack with no water and electricity, or she's in a township like Khayelitsha in Cape Town with over 1 million people living in cardboard shacks with corrugated tin roofs if they're lucky. When it comes to pregnancy, all women are the same. And she would go into her clinic just like I did with my 2 daughters and be so full of hope and so full of pride and excitement and joy for this new life. And when she would be offered her first test and it would come back positive, there would be nobody to counsel her, nobody to tell her that there was something she could do. And because of the stigma, she'd carry it in isolation. She'd be afraid to disclose. She'd fall through the cracks in the medical system and go home to die. What Mentor Mothers did, Mothers to Mothers, training Mentor Mothers, made so when she got that diagnosis, there was somebody there. And she would become part of a sisterhood of women who were just like her. She could come every day to the clinic if she could. We'd give her a good hot meal every day, and we'd counsel her. The Mentor Mothers, not we. The Mentor Mothers would counsel her on everything having to do not just with her status, but with nutrition, with overcoming stigma, with proper feeding options, with all the things that she needed to know as a pregnant woman and as an HIV-positive pregnant woman. And we keep her in the program until such time as the baby is tested, generally around 18 months. And about 97% of the babies born into the program do test negative. That's part of it. Then we have to keep the mothers alive to raise their children. We already have 6 million AIDS orphans. We have a holocaust of AIDS orphans. We don't need any more. So our mothers become empowered. We pay them. It was considered highly revolutionary at the time because in Africa, in the developing world, people expect women who can least afford it to make up the bulk of the volunteers. But we believe in empowering every woman and that she can't feel empowered unless she's treated like she's a value and her time is a value. So by paying them, they become role models in their communities. They become the go-to people. They become the bridges to seek follow-up medical care. They become seen as paid professionals in the medical community. So it's a question of one mother caring for another. A very simple solution to a complex problem, and I think that's at the bottom of most successful social entrepreneurial programs is simplicity and filling a need. Today, we started out Mothers to Mothers not that long ago. We were operating out of the back of my partner Mitch's car. We had one site in Cape Town. We begged, borrowed, and steal mostly money. Today, a few years later, we have 704 sites in 9 countries. We employ over 1,800 HIV-positive women who would otherwise be unemployable, and we're reaching 1 out of every 5 HIV-positive pregnant women globally. So it was finding a need, getting passionate about that need, and finding a way to fix it.
Fantastic.
I think my story is similar to yours about finding a need. My name's Amos Winter, and I'm currently a postdoc with MIT, and my background's mechanical engineering. I did my undergrad here, and then master's and PhD at MIT, and I run a group there called Mobility Lab, where we work on mobility-focused technology, primarily for developing countries. But what I want to tell you about is the story behind this device. This is called the Leveraged Freedom Chair, and it's a wheelchair designed specifically for people in rural areas of developing countries. So what happened is about 5 years ago, I was finishing my master's and my girlfriend was working in Tanzania. And I wish I could give you an altruistic motivation of how I got involved with this, but I wanted to follow my girlfriend to Tanzania. So I got hooked up with a few wheelchair organizations just by chance, and they wanted to know what the current state of technology was in Tanzania for wheelchairs. So I spent a summer talking to wheelchair users and disability groups and wheelchair manufacturers. And what stood out to me was that the currently available products could not meet people's needs fully. And so in a developing country, if you're lucky enough to get anything, you'll get either a Western-styled wheelchair, which you grab the wheels and push on, and you can imagine that would be very difficult to travel long distances on rough ground with. Or you can get a hand-powered tricycle that you pedal like a bike, but with your hands. And those work well on flat ground, but aren't so good off-road, and they're too big to use indoors. So when you do get indoors, you have to crawl on the ground. So what stuck out to me and I'm a machine design engineer by training, what stuck out to me is that there wasn't a device to meet that specific market. And that market is 20 million people throughout the developing world, and 70% of them live in rural areas. So what I started thinking about was, how do I make basically a mountain bike for your arms, but without any of the mountain bike complexity and cost, because for this to actually be a viable product, it had to cost around $100. It had to be serviceable in the field. And so about a year and a half went by, and I realized that you can vary your mechanical, so I'll geek out for a second here, but it'll make sense in a second. But you can vary your mechanical advantage by grabbing a lever at different points. I think most of us learn, even in elementary school, a lever is the most simple machine. And if you need more leverage, you use a longer lever and can produce more torque. So the way this wheelchair works is, right now it's a conventional wheelchair, and you can use it like a normal wheelchair indoors, just like any other wheelchair. But the trick behind the design is that it has these two levers that come out. You stick them in the drivetrain. Does someone want to be a lovely assistant? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, here's my Vanna White. You want to sit in it? Okay. Okay, so you take the levers out, you sit in it, and now you propel yourself by just pushing on the levers. Yeah, exactly. Great. Okay, so yeah, you stop by pulling back. So anyway, the important points of this system is that you effectively change gear by just simply shifting your hands up and down the levers. So if you have to go through mud or sand, you can grab up high here and you get a long lever. And if you want to go fast, you grab closer to the pivot, and you can go through a bigger stroke every push, and that creates a faster rotational speed, makes the chair go faster. So this system gives the user a 3-to-1 change in mechanical advantage. And to put that in perspective, the best mountain bike parts you can buy right now give you a 6-to-1 change in mechanical advantage, so twice the performance, but they cost over $1,000. This drivetrain gives you half the performance, but costs under $20, so less than 1/50th the cost. Yeah, you're all set. You can get out. Yeah. So it gives you a wide range of performance, so you can go fast on flat ground, but also have the mechanical advantage to muscle your way out of tough situations like in sand or mud. Couple other points in the chair is that every single moving part is made of a bicycle part, and they're actually bicycle part standards that you can find anywhere in the world. So you can make this chair in India, repair it in Guatemala, repair it in Southeast Asia, it doesn't matter, same exact parts. And because these parts are so widely available and so cheap, this chair cost, the production, or the sale cost right now in our high-level production that we're starting up is going to be $100, which is less than or equal to the cost of any other competing product. And you can service it anywhere, and you can make it anywhere. So I guess just like Robin, the need motivated, necessity is the mother of invention, right? And so right now what I'm doing is I'm based in New Delhi, India. We're doing the last trial before large-scale production with Jaipur Foot, which is the biggest disability group in the world as far as provision of assistive devices. They give out about 100,000 products a year. And following the trial, they and their manufacturing partner have agreed to ramp up to production of 1,000 units per month, which it looks like some of the first batches are going to go to Haiti as well as throughout India.
So here's what I'd like to do for the next half hour or so that we have. We're going to do about 15 minutes of quick questions, short questions, short answers to both of you, and then we're going to have audience questions and answers. Okay? So the first question is, how did you get involved with what you are doing now?
It's going to sound a bit like a lifetime story, but I was, as you heard, a TV director and producer, and to make a long story short, it was a 20-year career. It was terrific for a long time until I had children, and then wasn't spending any time with them, and the quality of television was getting worse, and I was getting really bored and overstressed, and knew I wanted to do nonprofit work, just had no idea what I was qualified to do. Fast forward a few years, one of my best friends from Tufts, actually, from the time I was 17, Karen Besser, was living in Chicago, went in for a minor shoulder surgery, and didn't come out of anesthesia. And I was called, and I went immediately to Chicago, and her brother, who I'd known since I was 17 also, flew in from South Africa. He had moved to South Africa with his family a couple of years prior. And he is an OBGYN from Harvard, and we sat by Karen's bedside for 2 weeks while she went deeper into a coma. And during that time, he was telling me about this idea he had, this gap he was seeing in Africa, in the clinics that he was doing obstetrics in. And I was telling him about, the work I had been doing and that I was ready for a change but didn't know where to change. And Karen ended up passing away. And I went into an emotional tailspin. Karen had been the one she'd been my rock, and she'd gotten me through the deaths of my mother and my stepfather within the couple of years, and a bout of breast cancer. And when she went, it was kind of the final straw for me. And I kind of climbed under the covers and didn't want to come out. And Mitch called and said, "Why don't you come visit me in South Africa and see what I'm doing?" And I said, "No, that's ridiculous." And my husband said, no, go, get out of the covers. And so I did. I went to just visit him, just to kind of do something. And the second day I was there, I went on rounds with him, and I started meeting these amazing women. These women that had such courage and such strength. They were HIV positive. They were living in shacks, and they found something to be joyous about. And they had such a core. And it was like a bucket of water for me, and I kind of woke up and said, "What is this? You can't feel sorry for yourself. Look at these amazing women." And I called my husband that night, and he's quite an extraordinary man back there with the camera. And I said, "Jeff, I really want to do this. I really want to move here and do Mothers to Mothers." And he basically said, "Okay." And a few weeks later, we picked up our 2 daughters and our 2 dogs and packed up the house and had moved to Cape Town. So that's my lifetime movie story. And if anyone wants to option it, I'll talk money.
All right, Dr. Winter.
Yeah. So I was wrapping up my master's. My girlfriend was in Tanzania. She said, "You can't come here for the summer and just hang out. You have to work." And I wanted to do something involved with technology. And MIT has a program or an office called the Public Service Center that they link students up with basically like internships abroad and fund them to travel abroad. And so through them, I got hooked up with an organization in the U.S. that has been designing wheelchairs for 30 years for developing countries, as well as one in Tanzania, and put together this project of assessing the current state of wheelchair technology in that country. And so once I got on the ground, and I talked to over 100 people that summer, wheelchair users, manufacturers, disability groups, it was that face-to-face interaction and actually seeing how poorly the currently available products actually suit people's needs that initiated this project.
Terrific. If you could just talk about a couple of the key secrets of success in each of your endeavors.
Well, for me, it's interesting because you'll get a good perspective, because mine is more of a service, a direct service. And so with us, I see a lot of NGOs that are great ideas, run by people who have great passion, and they fail. And I've thought about this a lot, especially since this whole social entrepreneur, we were winning social entrepreneur awards before we even knew what it meant. It was very strange. But what we did always do very deliberately is build this on a business model. We always realize that, okay, yes, this is a social program, it's a nonprofit, but that doesn't mean that you can't, that you shouldn't have measurables, that you shouldn't have outcomes, that you shouldn't have a solid business plan, that you shouldn't look at things as supply and demand. And what we saw is that everybody was looking at the developing world in terms of supply. How do we get the meds there? How do we get the doctors there? How do we build the clinics? Nobody was looking at the demand, like we're pumping millions and millions of dollars into medical treatment that nobody is uptaking. Where are the women? Why aren't they coming? How can we get them here? So I think by filling the gap is because we were really the first ones to come in and look at supply. Supply for this demand that had already been created. And so, I think for people, you can have a great idea, but if you don't have a solid business plan and look at it as more than just a great idea, you're not going to succeed.
Terrific.
Yeah, for our project, it was involving stakeholders in the design process that was the key to success. Because me as a Western engineer, I can calculate the stresses and choose bearings and all that, but I don't know what it's like to live day to day in a wheelchair in a developing country. And so, actually, the history of this project, I thought of the lever idea of shifting your hand up the lever. And me and a team of other students developed this idea and made a prototype, brought it to Kenya and Tanzania and Vietnam, tested with some people, and it was terrible, just awful. People are like, what are these idiot gringos doing? And that forced us back to the drawing board. And so with our collaborators in East Africa, we worked together and got their feedback, made the DEX design, and that was pretty good, but awful in some other respects. And then worked together again in Guatemala and came up with this one. And this one's quite good. We just finished a trial, and it's, people really like it. And it's pretty good as a wheelchair, and then off-road is just like nothing else, right? So I think the important part of all this is that and what we did correctly in the process is that we went in and didn't say, we are creating this technology for you. We went in and said, we want to work with you to create this technology. And in many, I suspect you see this a lot in Africa, the culture there, especially in East Africa, is that you can give people anything, and it could be total crap. And they will say, oh, thank you very much, and give you a big smile and, all that gratitude. And they won't give you honest feedback. And we had to push and really build the rapport and say, no, really tear us apart. Tell us how awful it is, and we'll work together, to make it better. And you build on those barriers and build that rapport, and people start being honest with you. And you also really show them that you value their knowledge. And it's just as important or more important than any knowledge I bring. And I think what was so powerful is that only by working together, we were able to build something much better than either of us could have done alone. So that was the biggest message that came out of this.
Let me ask each of you a separate question that's just kind of appropriate to your own to your own accomplishment. You, Robin, I assume run an organization now. So you have had the experience of any manager running any organization. I'm always curious about whether or not there really is such a thing as a social entrepreneur as opposed to as opposed to a business entrepreneur when it comes to running an organization. You talked about a business model, and I'm a very big believer, in fact, that there really is no difference between social entrepreneurs and business entrepreneurs. They have to have the same skills. I'm wondering, do you agree with that? And particularly in terms of building and running an organization, what skills did you have to acquire to do that?
I agree with you. I don't think there is a difference other than your expectations. We don't expect to make money, but we do expect to have results. We do expect to have healthy children. We expect to have healthy mothers. That's our currency. But it is still about looking for measurable successes. So in that, I completely agree with you. For me, I'd never been a business person. I'd been a creative person more. And at the very beginning, when I first moved there, I was in so over my head, I can't tell you. I thought my brain was going to explode every day. I was learning so much. And for me, what saved me was getting help. In the beginning, when we couldn't afford to pay talented help, getting extraordinary volunteers. Getting volunteers from business school to help me do budgets. I didn't know how to do an Excel spreadsheet when I got there. I still don't, frankly. But but to get people, my strength was I can tell a story. I knew from producing television how to tell a story. So to tell a story in ways that would engage people that had talents that I needed. To be able to get people who could have made a lot more money in the U.S. working for a private enterprise to give up their time to come and give their talents to us for a little while. So that was my strength, is being able to engage talent and to be able to engage donors. When you're starting something, you don't have anything to show for it. All you have to show for it is your energy and a good idea, and you got to make people believe that you are scalable. Now it's easy. Now we can say, well, look what we did in 10 years. But then we didn't have anything to show. So I was able to tell a good enough story to get the kind of help I needed. But certainly, I walk into our headquarters in Cape Town now, and I think, my God, it's like yesterday that it was me and Mitch and 3 volunteers, and now we've got 18 people in the finance department, and they all know how to do spreadsheets. And I don't have to do that anymore, which is awesome. But, then it gets to, it's very different to manage in the developing world. It really is. When I first came in, and I came from television, and I was used to working long days and working nights, and that was my expectation. I wasn't used to people drinking tea for an hour 4 times a day, and leaving work early and having a quality of life. And honestly, I think I learned as much from them as from me. And I learned a lot more about what it takes to be happy and have a good quality of life than I ever could have here. So for what that's worth.
That's very interesting. So it's not just what you had to learn about running a business, but it's also what you had to learn about running a business in a very different culture.
Oh, yeah. I mean, one very quick story is when we were first looking at Ethiopia, and it was before we knew how to expand the program ourselves, and so we were kind of giving the program to another large NGO in Ethiopia, and Mitch and I had gone there, and we'd, kind of given them what we called mothers in a box at the time. Here's the program, here's the curriculum, this is what you go and do. And we would have these calls, and we'd tell them all this stuff, and at the end of it, they'd say, well, that's great, but where do we get the paper? And I'd be like, oh my God, it's like you make all these assumptions, but we'd given them this big program, but they didn't know where to get the paper and pencil. So you really have to come from a different place.
Right. Let me ask you, which came first, the product or the market need?
The market need definitely came first. And would you like me to also answer along Robin's question? So the key for us, as far as running a successful project, was partnering with the best people. I realized right off that we had to create a technology that was viable and that could fit into the existing manufacturing and distribution channels that exist in the developing world. So, if the Rotarians want to buy a wheelchair for someone, they can buy one of these just as easily as they can buy another wheelchair. And also, these manufacturers know what it's like to manufacture in developing countries. So, I think it's only because of that close collaboration we had with them that the technology grew up into something actually viable.
I'm going to just ask 1 or 2 final questions so that you guys can start to think about the questions that you may have for the panel. One thing that I think people are always curious about is as you look back on the path, for you it's a shorter look back, are there, did the sequence of events that happened in your life have to happen in that sequence to bring you here, or were there shortcuts?
Wow, that's a really good question. It's hard to know, what path you would take if you'd done something different. So there's really no way to know. I'm certain I wouldn't have ended up doing AIDS work in Africa had the things that happened to me not happened to me. And if I hadn't been so open to the idea that it was time to start giving back and do something new, I think I would have gotten there eventually, but it might not have been to this. It might have been to something different. It's like I was talking to some of the kids out at lunch today, who are seniors and are so terrified that this first job is so important and it's gonna set the path for the rest of your life. And my advice is always like, that couldn't be farther from the truth, because you haven't a clue who you're going to be in another 20 years and what your priorities are going to be, and your path is going to take you. You think you're here, but it's never linear. You're going to go here and here and here and here. So I'd like to think I'd end up somewhere as happy as I am now, but hard to know.
I think advice for seniors, keep your eyes and ears open for good problems, because I wouldn't have gotten into this if my girlfriend hadn't been in Tanzania. My background's like military technologies and really, really more high-tech type stuff. And it was only because I ended up in Tanzania, I saw the problem firsthand, and a lot of the motivation for me was the technology. Yes, I want to help people, but man, this is a hard technological problem. A device like this doesn't exist, and there's a reason. It's tough to make it. So, if you're going to be successful, you're going to be successful, I think. You know, and I think part of that is wanting to be successful and keeping your eyes and ears open for good problems to attack.
Terrific. Okay. Questions, comments, reactions to either of the panelists or to me?
I have a microphone, so if you'll wait until I bring you the mic, that'd be great.
I think the interesting thread here is this morning, and I can't remember which one it was, at the end of her presentation, she said the most important thing is to listen. Mm-hmm. And what you've both really talked about is that you were able to listen. And that's how you got to be problem solvers, because you could really hear what was going on, which is great.
Another question?
Hi, I'm Deb, and I think one of the interesting things, I do a lot of work in the social entrepreneurial world, and I think what I'm hearing from both of you is what you're doing is you're filling a niche that the market doesn't fill. You're talking about this, your wonderful wheelchair. If there had been a market for that, somebody would have taken the trouble to have done it. But what a social entrepreneur does is he or she fills a niche that the market doesn't fill. That's sort of my perspective on things. And so the resource development for that, you have to create another market. So you're not just creative and a great listener and a wonderful person. You're having to raise money and raise funds that a market does not exist for. And I want people to understand how tremendous the work you guys have done is, because you've had to create a whole new financial market and financial model for what you've done. I just thought that's just a comment.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point, and maybe that is something that is different about social entrepreneurs versus business entrepreneurs because of what Deb said.
Can I add something to that?
Of course.
I think and I suspect you'll agree with this, I think something fascinating about this space is both of us identified a market outside of our own cultural background, right? And I think technologically with this, you know, the market for, or the need for being able to travel off-road multiple kilometers a day in a wheelchair doesn't exist at all in this country. You know, we have smooth sidewalks, elevators, accessible buses, so there's really no need for a product like this. There's no catalyst for innovation, really, and to push that innovation. It's only, you go into this new market and you find all sorts of opportunity. And I suspect that was kind of your experience too.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And when I talk to people here now, you know, I always get, you mean you can avoid transmitting the virus? I said, when was the last time you ever heard of a baby born with HIV in this country? And people say, oh yeah, you know, things get taken care of for us here, and we don't even recognize it because we assume that's how it should be. And we assume that's how it is the rest of the world. And when you are exposed to the rest of the world, you see how incredibly fortunate we are here. For me, one of the challenges is because, as you said, funding is a huge factor. And when you're not making money and you can't, it isn't a business proposition that you're offering somebody a return on their investment, to make it real to people here. And I don't know if, you know, in you telling your stories of the need there, you probably encountered some of the same challenges I did, is trying to get people to understand what life is like for a mother 10,000 miles away and why they should possibly care. And when I started and when we first moved, you know, what the reaction I got was people thought I was crazy. You know, it's like, why would anybody care? You know, we have our own problems here. People are going to address their own problems here. You're never going to be able to raise the money. I mean, this was before, you know, the White House got involved and Bono got involved, and you know, and everybody thought nobody's going to care. But the fact is I think I've learned people are better than we give them credit for, and if you can make them understand, they will care.
Dean Hollister.
What would you like Tufts to do to prepare or better prepare more effective social entrepreneurs of the future?
Well, I think sending students to other cultures is extremely important in that process. And doing it in a way where you're not just sending students for a week at a time. And I see a lot of presentations where people will, go to Kibera in Kenya and stay there for 20 minutes and think that they immediately understand the problem. I mean like offer semesters abroad or summers abroad where you get that intimate interaction with another culture and really understand the differences. And I think once you get to that level, then you can start creating social entrepreneurial solutions. So I'm not sure what Tufts offers now in that space. I went abroad as an undergrad here to New Zealand, but I don't know if there was any programs to like developing countries. I'm not sure if there is now.
Well, Ghana is one of our oldest programs, actually.
That's great.
It wasn't offered when I was here in the Stone Age. So, I mean, I went to London. That was about as exotic as it got that in 1977. But I think I've heard that, the whole world is, and my daughter now is in Ghana going to school. And I agree. I think that's an incredible thing. I think the other thing, and, I'm too far out of school to know what the kids' priorities are now, but my concern is I see young people always gearing now towards how much money they're going to make. And if there's a way of instilling in kids that money's great, especially if you donate it, but there's satisfaction from so many other things. If they can be exposed to people who really are fulfilled and aren't wealthy necessarily, I think that's a good thing. I don't know how you do it other than, again, I see too many kids who go abroad and it's all about playing. It's all about, they're not really doing anything that they're going to feel satisfaction from. And, it's why we stopped taking undergraduates. Actually, for our volunteer program, we only take graduate students because they wanted to come and be babysat and taken on tours and have fun. And we felt they were supposed to come over and help other people.
Taryn.
Hi, I'm Taryn. It's been incredible to watch over the 3 years and working in the social enterprise industry, revenue generation be really integral to most of the nonprofits that I've been working with. And I'd love to hear from you more about your business models. And it sounds like, Robin, your model is mostly nonprofit and strictly philanthropic dollars. Is there any push within your company to integrate revenue generation? And Amos, I think for you, you could go either way. So I'd love to hear more about what you're doing and why.
I'll go first, yeah. Yeah, so in the developing world at least, most people who need a wheelchair may make in a year on the same order as the cost of the product. So this is one of the cheapest wheelchairs in the world, but it's still $100. If you make $300 a year, you can't afford it. So with every organization we work with, either 100% donated product or a large subsidy is necessary. So as far as addressing that, we designed the product to fit into the existing donation channels, so it didn't cost any more. And so we could integrate it into existing wheelchair manufacturers and existing distribution schemes. Now, as far as generating those subsidies, what we're doing is we found in the US, because of the press we've got about this project, that we've had a lot of wheelchair users here say, hey, I'd like to go on a walking trail with my dog or be able to get around in snow in the winter. So we've teamed up with a product design firm here in Boston, and we're making a first world version of this. And the idea is then we could sell it for about $1,000. In that, I don't know if that sounds a lot to you, but a conventional high-end wheelchair is about $2,500. Hospital chair is about $200, and that's terrible. An active wheelchair user wouldn't use it. So you either get a high-end wheelchair for $2,500 or an outdoor wheelchair for about $4,500. So there's a huge market gap right at $1,000, and we think we can sell the high-end version of this for about $1,000, and then with the profits, give away one in the developing world. So it'd be a Tom's Shoes type model, buy one, give one scheme.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I spoke recently at a group of social investors, and I think they didn't like what I had to say because honestly, I don't believe in social investment. I think you either invest to make money or you're a philanthropist, and I think there's a lot of social investors that feel like they're philanthropists because they say, well, I don't have to make 15%, I can make 11%. So we are a traditional NGO. We are never going to make money. We are always going to be reliant on dollars coming in. That said, what we are working now towards is transition from mothers to mothers operated program to local government-owned programs. And so that for us is the gold standard. We're doing that in Kenya right now, and we're doing that in Rwanda. So we are actually training and capacity building for the existing structure to incorporate mothers to mothers in their national health care policy. So that whereas in Kenya, say right now we're operating, I believe, 78 sites that we are doing hands-on mothers to mothers, we are working with the government and the US government to take a mothers to mothers type model and expand it to all 4,500 sites within Kenya that offer maternal health care. We can't do it with our existing model, it's far too expensive. So we're working on a 3-tiered model that will incorporate our existing direct implementation model as sort of the platinum version that will be where we teach others. We'll have a social franchise model where we'll work with partners that are already doing services on the ground, and then we'll have more of a TA kind of model where we will identify people in the remote villages, low density, low prevalence areas to take the training and the curriculum and adapt it to areas where there may be only 1 or 2 HIV positive moms a month. So while, yes, it is a model that's highly adaptable, highly scalable, but will never make money.
Yes.
For those of us who are undergraduates, specifically seniors, like you said, who are very apprehensive about what the future may hold, we see that there are a lot of issues and a lot of problems that are being dealt with. So education, poverty, sustainable development, health, etc. I was wondering if you had any advice for us as to how to pinpoint one of those and become involved with it in order to maximize the our specific abilities that we would be able to contribute to it as much as we can.
Well, I mean, I would say, look, when you're coming out of college, generally your priority is to be self-sufficient, to achieve some measure of success, and I think that's incredibly important. And I think while you're doing that, it's important to listen to yourself and what makes you happy. Not tell yourself, well, I should be happy because I should be doing this because I should be making this much money. But as you're going along that path and support, what makes you happy? What part of that job makes you happy? And as you heard, keep your ears open for opportunities where you can maximize that fulfillment that you're getting from whatever part of the job you're working at. And volunteer. If you think something's interesting, give it a few hours a week and volunteer and see if it holds a passion for you.
Yeah, keep your eyes and ears open and don't get discouraged. That's another thing I'd say. When I wanted to do that first summer in Tanzania, I contacted a lot of groups and I was an MIT trained engineer, but they said, sorry, we don't have the time to train you how to do development technology work, but I just kept, looking around and talking to people, and something worked out.
Yeah, I think just one thing I would add is, don't take it all too seriously. It is not the first thing that you do after you graduate college is guaranteed to not be the last thing you do. And so I almost think it almost doesn't matter just as long as you jump in, get into the pool, start swimming, and regardless of what sector it is, once you're in the kind of the working world, and you have your eyes and ears open, which frankly to me is one of the most important things that you learn at Tufts. I was a history major. That had nothing to do with anything I ever ended up doing, except reading the paper every day. But what you do learn at Tufts is you learn to listen, you learn to be inquisitive, and one of the things that's really important that I hope you heard from all three of us is you learn to network and use that network, because the relationships that you have are probably the single best entree that you have to a whole world of possibilities. And that will only grow as you leave Tufts. And you're very lucky that you're coming from a place with some people who I can tell you right now are guaranteed to be among those who change the world. So make friends with them, make sure you know some of them, don't lose their email addresses, and network with them later. We'll take one more question, one last question.
Hi, my name is Diego. I'm from the class of '09. And this question is more for Robin, but Amos, feel free to jump in. I work in international development and microfinance, and one of the things that I was very curious about is how have you dealt with the lack of government structure or the roadblocks that sometimes government can put in your way to do the work you do, like corruption or politicization of your work, and how have you dealt with that? It will be great to hear.
It's a really good question, and it's a very difficult question, and you're on target. And it really you can't answer it. You know, Africa's a big continent, and every government is different. South Africa, where we started, was hugely problematic in terms of the government. The national government was a workaround. When we started, Mbeki clearly was not accepting that HIV leads to AIDS. His Minister of Health was a total idiot who told people to take garlic, to eat garlic. And so you just had to work around them. Fortunately, there were people in the local governments and provincial governments that were a little bit more flexible in terms of believing scientific evidence than their bosses in the national government, and we worked with them. We started out working really with the local and provincial governments in South Africa, and it wasn't until the new president came in with the wonderful new Secretary of Health, Head of Health, that things are changing in South Africa. In other countries, we have found less of a challenge than in South Africa. Most of the national governments now are very concerned about HIV, are very concerned about the problems in maternal health. Their problems are they don't have money. But we don't even think about expanding into another country now unless we do so at the invitation of the local Ministry of Health. And we actively work with the Minister of Health to identify the necessary sites that we should go into where we're needed most. So it really is a partnership. And other than in South Africa, where our headquarters is, we only hire local people. We don't bring any foreigners in. We don't have Americans running anything. Our country offices are entirely led by local people. So it's all about, and that gets us into the good graces of the government, because we really are about building local capacity and fostering local talent. Where the corruption is horrific, we haven't ventured, like a country like Nigeria, which is a nightmare. In terms of corruption, we put that off because we have yet to see anybody succeed in Nigeria. So until we can kind of figure out how to crack that nut, we haven't gone there, even though the need is very great in Nigeria, but the corruption is insane. Everywhere else it's manageable, and it really hasn't been a problem.
Our approach has been to work with well-established organizations. So when they start selling this, it's them introducing a new product, not us. So they've already navigated, those difficulties.
Very good. Well, I think it's been a really interesting panel. I hope you guys do too, and thank you both.